How can you speak English better? That's what I want to talk about today in today's video. I want to talk about some things that I've done that have helped me speak French better. And these are actually things that I indirectly did when I was learning Spanish as well. But in terms of my French learning, I actually employed techniques very intentionally and with good results, in my opinion. So this is a topic that I'm sure all of you are interested in. So I'm happy to talk about it today. I'm sure that you'll be able to take some lessons from this video, even if you don't like everything that I say or all my tips. I think that this will be useful for you. It will be useful for your mindset in terms of getting you thinking about how you can effectively create a strategy for yourself to actually speak better. That's what we're talking about in this video. We're not talking about understanding English better or reading better or whatever. We're talking about speaking. That's what I want to focus on in this video. And I want to talk about my overall philosophy when it comes to this and activities, specific activities that have worked for me. And I want to just go into detail for some of those things so that you can start to think about if these are things you might want to incorporate into your own learning. Okay? And before I get into all that, I do want to shout out my French tutor. I think I mentioned before that I have a really, really good French tutor who also makes content like I do for English learners. He does that for French learners. And from time to time, some of you will ask me about my recommendations for French content. Well, I want to direct you to his channel. I'm going to put the link down below for his YouTube channel. He also has a Patreon as well, and he makes great content. Actually, I use his content as well. He makes content like mostly for listening, like me. And I'm going to put his channel on the screen. I have to remember to do that when I edit this. So I'll show you his channel. And of course, the link will be down below in the description. So please go check out his channel. If you're learning French and you want to find good content in French, he makes great content, really interesting, natural, great listening practice type content. So please check him out. Go and follow him there. Watch his videos, leave comments on his videos. I really want to help him out. Excuse me. I want to help him have more success. And so most of you probably aren't learning French, but some of you might be learning French. So for those of you, please go check out his channel. All right, let's talk about what I've done differently recently in terms of like my language learning. And specifically my goals or my goal to speak French better. Okay. So up until, let's say, last year, my listening in French was pretty good and my speaking was not. I just did not have a lot of practice. I had very little experience speaking. And so my goal was to become a better speaker. So let me talk about what I have done differently and my philosophy, my idea behind what I've done differently. So I'm going to be looking at my notes a lot. Forgive me because I wrote a lot of stuff down here. So I'm the listening guy. You consume my content to practice your listening, of course. And I think listening is really the foundation for your knowledge in a language. However, if your main goal is to speak, You're going to have to do some different activities if you want to accelerate that skill, right? Speaking. Of course, just listening improves your speaking. I believe that. I've seen that for myself, and I've met many people who have never spoken before, and then when they finally speak, they can already have a conversation when it's their first time ever speaking because of all the listening they've done. So listening really is the foundation of your knowledge, in my opinion. However, if you want to accelerate your speaking improvement, like I did, I think that we need to add some activities that are more output focused, meaning you produce the language, versus input where you consume the language. So I'm the input guy, I'm the listening guy, but I want to talk about output today. So I thought about this. I thought about what would make me speak better. I thought I had some different ideas about things I could do, and I came to the conclusion that what I really needed to do was to fill in the gaps of things that I wanted to say or needed to say, but I couldn't say. I didn't know how to say them, or I said them incorrectly. So if you think about it, this really is the most direct way to improve your speaking. You find what you can't say and what you need to say, and you learn how to say it. Okay? The goal is not to learn how to say everything, right? No one knows how to say everything. What we want is to be able to say the things that we are trying to say when we speak that language. So in order to do that, to be able to fill in those gaps and actually learn those things, you have to expose or discover those gaps. You have to see where they are. So my goal was to discover my gaps and fill them in. That's basically what I did. I changed my method a little bit, and instead of just doing normal speaking practice and speaking like conversation classes, I decided to find my gaps and fill them. And you don't know what you can't say until you discover that, you expose it. So you gotta be able to, or you have to try to expose all of your gaps. That's kind of how this works. So it's very specific. We're targeting the things that you can't say, okay, and that you need to say. And so what I thought was that if I did this, it would really accelerate my improvement because it's very specific. I'm really just trying to learn the things that I need to say, I want to say, but I can't say. So what did I do in order to do this? So none of this is revolutionary. These are very basic things. You've probably heard other teachers or other language learners recommend these things to you. So don't expect anything revolutionary here. These are all basic things, but they fit this philosophy, this target, this goal that I had of filling in my gaps in my speech. So number one, the most important thing for me, in my opinion, talk to yourself, okay? I know some of you, maybe many of you, don't like doing this, but I think this is one of the best things you can do, and I'll tell you how to do it right now. Don't just talk and hope you get better. Let me tell you how you can use this to really fill in your gaps. So talk to yourself out loud. Of course, you can do it silently in your head. That's fine. But it's better to do it out loud because you practice your pronunciation. You are actually using your muscles. You're more focused on what you're saying. I found that when I did this in my head, I would get distracted a lot and start thinking about other things. But when you're speaking out loud, you're actually focused on actually speaking, right? And it really just simulates reality, right? It simulates a real conversation. And this can really put you in conversation mode. So do it out loud. Talk about what you normally talk about, okay? So what do we normally talk about? We talk about our thoughts, what we're thinking, right? Our feelings, how we feel, our interests. When you're interested in something, you like to talk about it. You often talk about this if the other person is willing to talk about this interest as well. I talk a lot about languages because I'm interested in languages. So that's an important thing for me to talk about when I talk to myself. Work, we talk a lot about our work. So I think that's a great one to talk about. Events, things that you did over the weekend or a trip that's coming up or whatever, right? Events. And then just plans in general. We often talk about our plans for the weekend, next week, next month, the future, your goals, things like that. There are plenty of things that you can think of that are really relevant that you normally talk about with other people. Now you're going to talk to yourself about these things. It might feel a little strange at first, but you'll get used to it really quickly. It's not that weird. And talking about what you normally talk about ensures that you'll fill in the necessary gaps. Again, the goal is not to be able to say everything that exists in English. Of course not. What you want to do is to be able to say the things that you want to say and that you need to say, okay? You want to fill in the necessary gaps in your speech, okay? And so when you do this exercise, if you're talking about things that you normally talk about, then you're actually going to find gaps that are really important to fill because you're probably going to run into this problem when you talk to someone else. So you'll be able to fill in that gap, those gaps that are actually important. Okay? Don't just talk about random things that you never talk about. For me, I don't ever really talk about robots, let's say. That's not really something that's interesting for me. So when I talk to myself, I don't talk about robots. I talk about those other things that I mentioned, my thoughts, feelings, languages, my work, my business, all that stuff, right? So when you do this, what's really, really important is to note down all the words and phrases that you can't say or that you're not sure about, okay? This is where you actually find your gaps and you fill them. So if you talk and you don't do this, you're not actually going to fill your gaps or fill in your gaps. You need to write down the words and phrases that you wanted to say, but you couldn't say or you're not sure about. And I find that it's helpful to just write these down in your language and don't translate them and look them up until after you're done. You can do this while you're talking, like interrupt yourself and look up the word. But I find that kind of distracts you. It's hard to get back into the conversation. It makes it less fun. Okay, so I think it's better to just, when you can't say something, just write it down and just continue on. And then after you're done, what you're going to do is you're going to look up and translate all of those words and phrases into English. Okay, and then after that, you study them, review them, think back to what you were saying, what sentence you were saying when you ran into that gap, and think of the context and everything like that. Say them again in that original context, like say a sentence similar to what you were trying to say when you ran into that gap, and then study them afterwards. You can do this in different ways. You can just review your words on a document later. Flashcards are great. I've started using flashcards. I think these are awesome. Some people don't like them, so you don't have to do this, but I think it's good to revisit these new words and review them. And a way you can do this naturally is by revisiting the same topic, talking about the same topic again, maybe later in the week, a couple days later. I did this where I would talk about something to myself, and then the next day I would talk about the same thing with the intention of using those words, with that intent, using those new words, the things that, like the gaps I had, the words that I discovered that I didn't know how to say. Now I'm going to tell the same story again to myself, and I'm going to use all those words in their context. So that's a great way to do this naturally. You can also do this by taking conversation classes with someone and talking to them about the same topics that you talked about, to yourself, and then you can use those words. I did that a lot, and I found that to be super helpful, and it's very satisfying to use those new words and phrases that are actually necessary for what you're trying to say, and doing that with someone else. So that's a great way you can do it. Find ways to revisit these words and these phrases, okay? You're going to discover many, many gaps. That's normal, but you just have to accept that fact that there are so many gaps in your speech, and you're just filling them in little by little. Right? As time goes on, you'll fill in more and more gaps. You're going to forget some. You're going to forget some of the words that you looked up. That's okay. All right? Just know that you're making progress, though. You're specifically filling in those gaps of things that you want to say, you need to say, but you can't say. And so talking to yourself like this is perhaps one of the best activities you can do. This helped me a ton. I highly recommend it. Another thing that I did that I recommend to you is doing translation, specifically with writing. You can do this speaking as well, but I think writing is really good for this. I used my transcripts of my episodes for this. You probably don't have something like me where you have a document of words that you said. For me, I have those transcripts, so it's really convenient. But if you don't have that, which I'm sure none of you do, it'd be great to use something like a journal. And if you don't write in a journal, maybe this is a good habit that you can pick up. What's important about this is you want to use some type of writing that like you actually said or you wrote, or maybe it's not from you, but it's something really relevant for you. So maybe you just find a really relevant blog article online or something like that, something that's in your field of interest or your field of work, and use something that is going to have a lot of language that like you might say. That's why I used my transcripts, because I literally said these words. So I know they're important. They're things that I want to say. So if you don't have that, use something that has language that you know for sure is important for you, okay? And so what you're going to do is you're going to find this in your language, and then you're going to translate this in writing into English without using autocorrect. Don't let the computer or your phone correct you as you're going, right? If you do this without that autocorrect tool, it'll help you learn how to spell words correctly. Spelling is hard in English. It'll help you just become a better writer, right? You're not relying on the device to write it for you, to finish the phrase for you, right? You're writing it. And it helps you learn grammar, actually. I found that it helped me really recognize patterns and see what things I couldn't say correctly, I couldn't write correctly in terms of the grammar. It really just helped me see different patterns and things like that. And that's one of the great things about doing this in writing is it's visual. You can see it. And I found that it helped me recognize patterns, recognize grammar more easily than if I were just hearing it, perhaps. You kind of get the rules in context because you're seeing the sentences. Maybe sometimes you think you're writing it correctly and then you can't, and then you see, oh, wow, I was supposed to use this tense there. And then it makes you think about the rules. It's really good. It's a really good activity. And you're going to do the same thing that you did with the speaking activity. When you speak to yourself, you note down all of the words and phrases that you don't know how to translate into English, that you don't know how to say in English. Of course, if it's something completely irrelevant, something that you'll never ever say, then forget about it. But if it is something that is relevant or a normal phrase or whatever, then write this down. Say, oh, okay, write it down in your language. You didn't know how to say that in English. And do the same thing. Afterwards, go back and look up all these words and phrases, and then see what they are in English, and then write them into like the document where you're translating this. Actually finish those sentences, fill in those gaps literally where you couldn't write it in English. And then you'll go and you'll see the original context of what you were trying to translate and review them. Say the sentences out loud multiple times. Do the same thing that you did with the other exercise. Use flashcards if you need to. Review these in different ways. These phrases and words might not be quite as relevant as the ones you'll find when you're talking to yourself, because when you're talking to yourself, you're exposing your words and phrases that you need for sure. With this, you might have some words and phrases that are useful, but you might not use them in your own speech because they're someone else's words. For me, because I used my transcripts, it's still really, really relevant because it's my words. That's why I say the best thing would be to use a journal. If you journal in your own language and then use your own words and translate those, that's the best. But again, most of you probably don't have that. And so, you want to find something really relevant, but not all of the words and phrases will be 100% relevant. So that's the one downside here. Okay. But you can do the same thing, and it's kind of like the same benefit plus some other benefits of writing, right? So this I found to be really useful as well. I found that some of the things I was able to say afterwards, like new words and new phrases, were coming from my translation gap fills, where I was filling in my gaps, and then I started using that phrase or word or whatever. So that's really good. And then lastly, the third thing is you want to take classes, conversation classes, with a tutor who will give you correction. So like my French tutor, who I talked about earlier, he's really, really good at this. He gives a lot of correction. He helps me fill in my gaps as I'm talking, right? And really the goal here with these conversation classes is not just to speak. Of course, that's, what we're doing, we're speaking, but you still want the goal to be to fill in the gaps. You want to expose where those gaps are. This can be frustrating because you are running into phrases that you don't know how to say, but this is how you specifically target what you need to say and can't say. It's uncomfortable because you keep running into these gaps, but this is how you fill them, all right? You don't just say the things that you already know how to say and just stick to those topics and try not to, run into new words or phrases that are necessary. Of course not. You need to expose your gaps. That's how you do this. So it's important to find a tutor or a teacher who is willing to work with you on this. They don't need to give you, they don't need to correct everything that you're saying wrong, but they need to at least give you some correction. Like me, I give like a report at the end of my classes with a handful of really important errors that I think that the student can study and try to fill in those gaps, right? Or maybe they do this as you're speaking, but find a tutor who is willing to correct you and help you fill in your gaps, and study those new words and phrases that come up from that or that you discover during that conversation, right? Do the same thing. These were things, words and phrases that you wanted to say, but you couldn't say correctly. So they're very relevant for you. So use flashcards or use some other system where you review these words, you go back, revisit the topics. So maybe talk about the same thing twice with your tutor, or get two different tutors and talk about the subject first with one tutor and fill in those gaps, and then talk to another tutor about the same topic. And now you can try to use those those words and phrases that you used to fill in your gaps. And that's a great way of solidifying them in your brain. Okay, so find a way to review them and revisit them. And so all three of these exercises, talking to yourself and filling in the gaps, translating and filling in the gaps, and talking to a tutor and filling in the gaps, of course, they all have the goal of discovering what you can't say, but you need to say, and then learning how to say it. I can't think of a more direct approach to language learning. And honestly, this is what I did with Spanish in terms of learning to speak. I didn't do it intentionally, but this is what I did. I talked to my wife, who at that time was my girlfriend, on the phone every day, and I just learned how to say all the things that I couldn't say, but I wanted to say to her. That's how it was. It took a while, and it was not easy, I'll say, but it was the most direct approach to becoming fluent, because I was literally just learning every single thing that I needed to say. Instead of just waiting for the language to come to you and hoping that you'll learn to say the things you need to say, I think it's a great approach to actually go out and hunt, go out and try to find these gaps and then fill them. So that's kind of the general philosophy here. And what also happens with this is you're going to build like a stronger connection to these missing phrases and words than you would if you just try to memorize a random list of vocabulary words that maybe aren't relevant to you. When you were trying to say something and you couldn't say it, and then you had to look it up and then learn the correct phrase, that creates a stronger emotional connection to that word or phrase, and you're more likely to learn it, especially if you revisit it a couple times and use it again in another conversation. So I find this to be a really good approach. It's a very specific approach. Like I said, you're still going to forget a lot of the things that you learn, right? Because you'll have tons of gaps. So you're not going to memorize everything that you learn, but little by little, you will, remember some, forget some, and then you'll remember them again later on when you run into that same gap, and you'll relearn them. And it's just a process that you go through. And as you continue on, there are, fewer and fewer gaps, which is nice, right? But of course, overall, there are going to be tons of gaps, especially if you're just starting to speak. Okay. So I think that this is a great approach to speaking in particular. Of course, you want to keep on listening. Okay. The listening still is the foundation of your knowledge in the language. But of course, you want to add these types of exercises to specifically focus on speaking. Okay. So I think that all these things have worked really well for me, and that they will for you as well. And, I already mentioned my French tutor. I want to mention him again, just in case you guys already forgot. If you're learning French, please go down and click on the link below for his channel, the French YouTube channel that he has. He has great content, so please check that out. And also let me know in the comments what you think about some of these activities and this approach to improving your speaking. Let me know if you've ever done anything like this, and let me know what you think. I'm curious to read your guys' comments. So Thank you all for watching this video. I hope this was helpful for you. Check out my French Tutors channel, of course, and I'll talk to you again next time.